So welcome to this week's, I guess what we've got for you this week is going to be about, surprise, surprise, our three-brain system again. And we're still looking at different angles of this. The so what that we have three brains. My name is Karen Judd Smith, and I have here with me Marilyn Morris. You can introduce yourself. Go, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Morris, out in California.
And I'm back over on the East Coast. And we're going to be looking today at the aspect of our three brains, or looking at it from a little bit from the point of view of a cybersecurity specialist or cryptologist. So why would we do that? Well, again, as you reminder, I'm sure that you have, well, even if you haven't, we do have one of these on the three brains, just quickly articulating the fact that we've got essentially a three-brain system where we've got our survival systems, our social emotional systems, and our more cognitive, rational mind that we think through based on language, et cetera, et cetera. And all of these are both the fast and the slow. The fast part of our thinking, a la Kahneman, the pre-rational components of our survival side, all of the things that we react to, we respond to, that our bodily functions that automatically go on with or without us thinking about it. We don't have to think, breathe, breathe, breathe. We'd never think of anything else just to stay alive. So then there's the social emotional stuff that, again, we react to things. We're afraid of something. We're going, oh, look how cute that is, without us even cognitively, consciously making a decision to think those thoughts. That's the fast side of us. Then, of course, as we've said before, and as most of us know, that marketers make very good use of the fact that when we have an emotional response to something, many times we've made a decision to buy before we even really think that we've made a decision to buy. And then our cognitive brain just starts to say, well, that was a very good reason that I had as to why I should purchase that extra shiny object that I really don't need, but it's just a little bit better than the last one that I had, whatever it is. So we've got this stuff going on all the time. So the point is, we've got this three-brain system, and it is a system. It's not just separate areas of the brain, although evolutionarily speaking, they did evolve at different stages throughout however human beings evolved.
2.5 million years, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. So we've evolved those systems, but we're still not always, I think, a part of why we're having this discussion is because we still haven't really found out how to utilize optimally this three-brain system that we have. And I think it's helpful for us to look at this three-brain system from the point of view of cybersecurity. Now, some people will think, oh my God, we're being reduced to a computer. Well, yes and no, but the point of today and what we're going to really look at, and which is why I want to introduce just a very simple definition that a Harvard professor, Bruce Schneier, who is a cryptologist and cybersecurity specialist, very well known by many in that field, and part of his thinking about and even looking at and noticing how some of the perspectives of cybersecurity specialists can be helpful to us in looking at our social systems in our larger community and society. So that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today. So just to get this, that was a long way of saying hi. We're glad to have you here. We're glad that you came back and that you can join us in today's session of looking at the human element. So what I want to do is just to start with, and then it'll become a little bit more apparent as Marilyn adds, and she teases out some of it, or gets me to explain what I mean by that, and then we have this ongoing dialogue. But Bruce Schneier, I'll get into the definition of what he's thinking about when he's talking about hacking and the hacking mindset, and why he says it's important for us to have, or to at least understand, the hacker's mindset. And that could mean the good hackers, i.e. the cybersecurity specialists, because they have to know what the bad guys are doing in order to prevent, to mitigate, to defend against the attacks that they make. But also having that mindset helps. Anyway, that's the only way, in a way, that they can compete with the black hat hackers, the bad guys, who are hacking for criminal purposes, or at least self-aggrandizing purposes, to the detriment of the larger group or society at large. So Bruce Schneier, what he says is that his definition of hacking is something that a system permits, but that is unintended, unanticipated, and even unwanted by the original designers. So many times we all know that updates in our operating systems come out, that patches are made to our existing systems and programs. Why? Perhaps because some hacker has discovered some weakness, some vulnerability in the system that they can tap into, and therefore access systems or log in to other people's accounts, whatever it might be. The hacker has found a weakness in the system, which is generally spoken about as a vulnerability, that is, again, unintended by the original coders of the program. It was unanticipated that it could even be found. They didn't know. That's why the bugs come out in the system. They don't mean them to be there, but they're there. And it's only when somebody tries to do something that they themselves have never tried to do, because they're not omnipotent on the computer, then it was clearly unanticipated and definitely unwanted. Nobody wants people to get into the back end of the banking systems and steal money. That wasn't the plan of having the code there in the first place. Unintended, unanticipated. So a hack is really, in a way, it's very clever, because they know the system. They have to know the system. They have to know the code. And the system itself has to allow it to happen. Maybe it didn't mean to allow it to happen, but it does allow it to happen until you put in that patch or you upgrade the system somehow. And then that particular approach can't be used anymore. So a hacker will find another weakness in the system, another vulnerability, another way to get in. So a hack is a clever, unintended exploitation of a system which can in fact subvert the very rules of the system itself at the expense of other parts of the system. So in the end, it's a little bit like a parasite. If a parasite invades a system so badly that it kills the system, the parasite can't live anymore either. But that's longer term, and they don't usually think about things that long, the parasites, and I don't know whether they think about it either. But anyway, so just trying to give you an idea of how he thinks about hacking. And so then he likens it to our tax code, or and he didn't, but one could say also talk about it in terms of our legal codes and systems. So the legislators who made the tax code, who wrote them, got enough people to vote for that particular legislation the way it was written. Many of them don't necessarily realize at that time that that code can make a loophole within which those people who have got the experts at hacking the system, i.e. the good guys CPAs and the tax lawyers, they are smart enough to they understand the code and they can find the loopholes. They can find the ways to utilize that for the benefit of their clients. So the system allows that. The system, however, is losing some of its potential funding because of those loopholes. And then more legislation has to be written so that they can get more funding, so that they can replace the lost funds because of the loopholes, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, one thing and another, all of these things have impact down the road.
Exactly.
What we're simply saying is that here, our three-brain system has some vulnerabilities. And today, even our social media is effectively hacking our poor brains so that we're getting constantly anxiety levels of the average person in society is going up because we're just so constantly being bombarded by all this social media. Do people intend for people to get greater anxiety? Well, not really, excepting some people within the system will say, well, yeah, if you really want somebody to buy this, you have to put the fear of missing out into the heart and soul of the person. So always make sure that you're making people afraid that they're going to miss out. So yes and no, people are intending people to get anxious. It's not all malicious, but the consequences sometimes may as well be. But the point here, to start this conversation up, to end this monologue, is that what this approach does, it helps us see that the importance of understanding how our three-brain system works so that we can actually do what we need to do to protect it, so that we can be those maybe not cybersecurity specialists, but neurosecurity specialists that can help protect not just our neurons, but our emotions and our social relationships, to recognize that there are specific things that we do need to be doing to protect, to mitigate. We can't stop all of the impact of life on us, but we can reduce the impact. We can put up protections. We can strengthen those parts of us that need strengthening so that when we are confronted with those situations, it doesn't have the same deleterious effects that it might otherwise have. Same thing like our bodies. We want to have strong, fit, healthy bodies so we can live well. That's becoming increasingly understood, but it's not always enough to get us to the gym or to get us out and doing our exercise and making sure that we're strong, fit, and healthy. But at least the first step is that we need to understand that that is important for our health and for our lives. So that's part of what we're looking at here today. And so this way of looking at it was something that I just kind of threw at Marilyn last night. And I know you had a couple of responses to this that I think that are very helpful to take a look at. So Marilyn, please jump in and I'll jump off my soapbox.
Well, no, it was a great review of what it is that we're up against when we engage in conversations and in relationships where there are snags and difficulties, and also where there are like the tracks, that we often get on, and we go around that track again and around and around, those ruts basically in our human relationships. And part of that happens as a convenience. The brain is something that works over the millennia. It's developed these kind of automatic strategies so that we don't have to think about breathing. Neither do we have to think about emotional responses. Oh, I should get angry now. We don't have to think about that. It happens. Oh, I'm angry, or I'm afraid, or I'm happy. So our lizard brain, the reactive part of us, that happens all the time, and that's also the automatic part, of our body. And so those automatic responses protect us and save us a lot of time, effort, and energy. Then the harder part, the thinking through part, does require education and discipline. Otherwise, we are just kind of emotionally reactive beings. And we've met folks like that who just live on the emotional reactive side of life. And there are institutions that appeal to that in our news agencies. You can see kind of the difference between a news agency that wants to emphasize the cognitive approach. Mm-hmm. So they try to be very reasonable and give you both sides and give you the news in that kind of context. And then there are some news agencies that no, they just go for the emotional, reactive, emotive aspect of your brain. And then they tell you what the reason is. And it might even sound ridiculous to somebody who's more used to having the cognitive area approached and persuaded. And you go, that's ridiculous, but it doesn't matter because the way the message is given is intended to cause alarm and raise an emotional response.
Because part of it is they know that works for getting clicks. I mean, that's why there's even the term called clickbait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know
especially
how many
on the mass media. Yeah, it works.
It's clickbait because a part of us, I mean, I'm not sure that everybody fishes, but, those who do fish know that when you're really wanting to get, when you're very serious about catching a fish, one of the things that you can do to even catch some of the biggest fish, you put bait in you put bait in the water. You don't just put the hook in the water, you put bait in the water because you want to get the hook, whatever. And we would not like to think that we're fish, but, there's a part of us that really is that reptilian kind of, I guess we could say Piscean part of our brains that is just very survival oriented. Something moves out of the corner of our eyes and we notice it. We've got that reptilian component in us that is so fundamental. And some people focus on that. Some, as you say, news agencies, some agents of media, information in the media focus on that as their approach compared to the more logical, putting all of the information out there, basing it on facts. But even in those situations, there's going to be an emotional component, maybe not as obvious, but there's always going to be perspective or an angle because, and this is just, there's no getting away from that. But that doesn't make having an angle wrong. It just is, there's no way around it. Each one of us has an angle on life.
And I think the advertising industry has long known these and has, employed that hackability of our three brain system, the fast part, the submerged part, and the kind of the science now that shows how our brain sifts and sorts through past experiences, and then those past experiences, the last time I heard about that, my neighbor got one and I didn't. And now this time I'm going to get one. But the brain sifts and sorts through its experiences, and that makes what they've been able to see in brain scans an emotional arousal. So it's not just that we're having that reactive part, but as we sift and sort through information, then there's an emotional response long before, and we're talking in milliseconds, but long before the decision's made. We've already kind of come to the conclusion, and then we make a decision and we give it a reason. And then, so that's how our three brain system is hackable. But there's hope. we're not suckered into every advertising. I know on the internet, sometimes I'll click something of interest and then that leads me to another site, and I go, oh, what's that about? And then the next thing you know, you get a video and they're talking about, if you take these pills, you're going to have this remarkable effect or whatever. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And then the fear of missing out, but there's only supplies limited, and you need to get and you'll get cheaper if you get 3 rather than just the 1, and all those ploys, and you get almost to the point of you've had that, oh, I actually could use those herbs or whatever, and you're almost ready to, and you go, just a minute. Just a minute. And then I go and I look up, is that a scam? Is that this and that? And then that slows everything down. And then I end up probably not buying that particular product because I really, really actually don't need it. But I'm hackable, so and then you just go, oh man.
Yeah. And that awareness, and then having your own kind of little system in place for when your own little antenna goes up, I'm brain hack, or whatever it is that you might call it. Then if you've got your own, well, it'll be there in 5 minutes. Let me go and make it, let me go and look at something else. Or as you said, look it up to see whether it's a scam, or is that kind of herb actually, does it actually work, or is this just really good hype? I mean, or it could be the latest dress or the latest car or a new property. Heavens only knows what it might be. But when you've got other systems in place that get you to consider it more fully, or if it's a good deal and you were going to get it anyway, go for it. There's no right or wrong in these types of situations, but not being aware, just only being driven by.
That's the point, isn't it? It's not about the right or wrong, but being aware or not aware.
Yeah.
Are you aware of why you're making that decision,
or
blindly making that decision?
And it's that self-awareness, and thank you for that, Marilyn, because it's that mindfulness, that awareness of what is going on that is the critical piece. Because in the bigger picture, almost anything can be right or wrong in different but specific situations and circumstances. Nothing is absolute in that way. But for me at that time, and for my own unique health needs or social needs, it can absolutely be unimportant, or it could be the perfect time. Who knows? So what about having 3 brains? It's important to understand that we do have that going on in us, because from the moment that we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, and frankly, while we're asleep, our brains are functioning and doing things. And for us to have that, that awareness, is it going to solve everything in your life? No, but it can help you figure out what to do and what decisions to make, and whether or not any particular situation is useful or not. It's just a perspective on who we are, how we function, and from the point of view of then a person who's concerned about improving their life situation, it begins to point in a direction of saying, okay, well, if this is what's going on, what are the things that we can, or what are the things that we need to do to help us make better decisions, to give us a greater capacity to handle emotionally even difficult situations? Are there things that we can do? And if there are, what are they? And why would they work, et cetera, et cetera. So the understanding that these three brains, or that who we are as human beings, the fundamental human element within us is kind of like this three-brain system, and it plays out. It has its physiological side, it has its social emotional side, it has its cognitive side. Because our lives, that's all of our lives. But that's just the point of understanding. Then the next questions really are, okay, why is it important? How do I make use of this information? And what are some of the specifics? And that's what, we can go into in another conversation. But today we just wanted to, at least I was interested in introducing the idea of really seeing this three-brain system of ours as hackable. And therefore, like us being that, neurosecurity person, cybersecurity, neurosecurity person, what are the things that we can do to mitigate the attacks or the unwanted approaches to us by social media or other people in our conversations? How do we deal with those things? How do we protect what's important to be protected? And how do we, even put to use that amazing, our survival system is, in its reactionary nature, is not bad. It's amazing. Our social emotional stuff is amazing. So how do we put that to use? And maybe one of the final things that I'd like to close with, and I'm going to ask Marilyn to speak about E.O. Wilson's comment about about how my understanding of this is that in the evolution of social systems, social biology, that there are certain types of systems that survive better than others. And I think that when we see that the kind of when we can optimize our three-brain system and strengthen our social emotional capacities, as well as dealing with our survival instincts, etc. When we do that, we're actually setting ourselves up to be in a better situation even maybe to survive ourselves. But so Marilyn, what does E.O. Wilson say? Who is he, and what does he say about that? That key piece of the evolutionary component of social systems.
Well, I'll just really briefly give that. E.O. Wilson is now deceased very recently, but for several decades developed the whole field of sociobiology. Is famous for his study of ants, but of all the what's called eusocial beings in the mammal world, only 3 species exist like that: mole rats and human beings. And we have the unique capacity for, as part of this huge brain that we've developed, it's for mostly, of course, we have the instinctive, selfish aspect. We have to have that for survival. But the rest of our brain is developed for social cooperation, and a wonderful word that he puts, confabulation, We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. So that whole huge language capacity for assessing friend or foe, and then creating cooperative relationships through storytelling. We share our stories of one another, and what we want to do as a society, and we make constitutions and all this kind of confabulation. But the thing is understanding the importance of language and the power of language, and how we then communicate and connect with one another. And I think that in your components to build those core, the core, human element, the very core of us is for social communication and cooperation. And so building that through the various tools that over the years in your work at the United Nations, with negotiating and working with people, and also just, working, understanding that whole language communication process. And so therefore you've devised like 3 kind of amazing tools to help people develop that core strength in communicating and connecting with others. And just specifically, because we're not going to do it today, but we will unpack it later, is the LAMP method, LAMPP, and those acronyms stand for, communication skills, and then solution shifting, solution focusing, shifting from negative problem thinking to solution building thinking, and then a personal kind of emotional, strengthening your emotional core through journaling, through the TQ20. And I'm just throwing out those names, but we'll unpack each of those tools, because that then plays to developing your core essential, the part that we have evolved into, and that is social beings, and how to do that at the personal level, maybe at the work level, and in your own context, the worldwide level at the United Nations. Talk about complicated communication. So, but basically that is a way then to kind of build neuro security, like you build for computers, cybersecurity. And I would say that neurosecurity is a lot more ticklish than cybersecurity. We're just talking about electrons there, but here you have your whole brain, body, being, and your personal history and all of that involved. So building those skill levels, those core, the core part of your being in context with communicating with others and building those relationships, giving people practical tools. You can read all about mindfulness and meditation, but what are some practical tools to help me get that difficult conversation that's been difficult for 30 years? How can I unpack that, unlock that, and do that in a neurosecure way? I think developing those tools and then utilizing them. That's why we, have to unpack our 3-brain system, because 2/3 of that we're often unaware of. Well, these tools help us become a little more aware and take that breath and say, wait a minute, let me come back in conversation with you before I react, and you react, and we react, and that kind of thing. So it breaks that apart a little bit and gives us a way forward in a positive way.
And the really good part that I love about the aspect of E.O. Wilson's social biology assessment, or I don't, his theories around that, is that the very simple part of the conclusion, as I understand, one of the conclusions he could come to was that those systems that lean into, this is putting in very day-to-day language, that lean into the collaborative engagement that is constructive and collaborative and cooperative. Those systems are the ones that last. The ones that are attacking and undermining and, the win-lose type of situations. One person might win and then the other person might lose in that moment. But when a system is built out primarily out of those kinds of relations where it's always a win-lose in almost every situation within that social system, that system does not last as well, does not function as well, does not have the longevity, does not have the evolutionary it can't last evolutionarily the way a system that is built for collaboration and cooperation. And that's part of the reason that as human beings, part of the reason why we are kind of the top rung, we're the top shelf species. I don't know
for
whether
the moment.
for the moment. We at least have the potential to, be a better, but anyway, it's our ability to cooperate and collaborate. It's not the ability to conquer and destroy.
Correct.
The thing that separates us and that gives us a future, so that it's investing in that, in our own personal relations, in our family relations, to invest in that part of our who we are is so critical for even for the long haul. So anyway, we've kind of gone around a long way today, covered a little bit of a territory from social biology to
cybersecurity
and cryptology thinking. So, but why not, when we're really talking about our brains? Of course, we're going to end up discussing a lot of things. That's what brains do. Okay, so we thank you very much for being with us, and thank you for having this conversation with me, Marilyn. We look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week.
Should be here.
See you then.